Don't you dare! You don't get to take credit for Evelyn's work again. I froze, just outside the conference room door, a stack of folders in my arms and a sudden tightness gripping my chest. That was Carter's voice, sharp, furious. He rarely raised it, which made this moment all the more alarming. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Lila replied, coolly. "I've been nurturing the Ridgeford relationship for months. Evelyn's simply following my strategic outline." I took a breath and stepped through the door. Carter turned to me instantly, still flushed with anger. Lila Lansing, recently promoted to Vice President of Enterprise Accounts, didn't so much as blink. Her pinstripe suit probably cost more than my monthly rent in St. Paul. "Evelyn, perfect timing," Carter said with a wave of relief. "Tell Lila who actually built the Ridgeford proposal deck." "My name is Evelyn Sawyer," I said calmly, "and I created the entire deck myself. I'm 39 years old, and for the past 7 years, I've worked at Marlo Systems in St. Paul, Minnesota. We design cloud infrastructure solutions for healthcare networks, critical systems that keep hospitals operating securely and efficiently. I started here as a regional accounts rep. Now I'm the senior business development lead. My bachelor's from the University of Minnesota hangs crooked in my cubicle. Not Wharton, not Yale. Just a Big 10 degree that got me here through hard-earned results, something Lila never stopped reminding me of." "We were just reviewing the Ridgeford presentation," Lila said smoothly, as if Carter hadn't just been calling her out. "I'll need your notes by end of day so I can finalize the slides." I met her gaze. "Actually, Lila, the presentation's already finalized. The entire strategy is centered around the modular system I designed specifically for Ridgeford's hybrid cloud migration." Lila's lips curled into a tight, professional smile. "I'll need to review it thoroughly. We can't afford any slip-ups. It's a $50 million 5-year contract," I said. "I understand what's at stake." What I didn't say was that I'd been cultivating Ridgeford for over a year. Midnight calls, back-to-back site visits, 10 versions of the integration model. I knew their CTO by first name. I even knew what kind of coffee she drank. As Carter and I walked back to our desks, he shook his head. "She's going to try and sideline you before the final meeting." I exhaled slowly. Let her try. Ridgeford's CEO won't sign anything unless I'm sitting at that table. And that was a fact no tailored suit could override. Ridgeford's CEO won't sign anything unless I'm in that room. What Lila Lansing didn't know, what no one at Marlo Systems knew, was that Caitlin Rhodes, Ridgeford's CEO, had been my college roommate at the University of Minnesota. We shared a tiny off-campus duplex, survived on mac and cheese, and studied for finals with sticky notes taped all over the walls. We still had brunch whenever she flew into Minneapolis for investor meetings. I never exploited our friendship. That would have crossed a line, but it certainly helped open the door to deeper conversations about trust tech and partnership. As I returned to my desk, I spotted a calendar notification from the CEO's assistant. I'd been requested for a 10:00 a.m. executive meeting the next morning. The subject line simply read, "Discussion Ridgeford Engagement." A cold twinge ran up my spine. Something told me this wasn't about a promotion. The executive boardroom at Marlo was everything I disliked gleaming. Glass brushed steel and the faint scent of polish that always made me feel like an outsider. I smoothed down the hem of my blazer from Kohl's and took a seat at the far end of the table. Our CEO, Malcolm Brennan, sat at the head of the table, tapping a Mont Blanc pen between his fingers. Lila sat directly to his right, a folder already open in front of her. 3 other executives flanked the table, middle-aged men in navy suits, all exuding quiet judgment. "Evelyn," Malcolm said with a cordial nod. "Thanks for joining us. Lila mentioned you've made great progress with Ridgeford Health Systems." I nodded and opened my notebook. "Yes, their CIO gave a verbal commitment to move forward. We're finalizing the integration timeline. Contract signing is expected next week. $50 million over 5 years. Malcolm mused, steepling his fingers. "With renewal potential. This would be the largest contract in our company's history. I'm proud of what we've built," I said, feeling the briefest wave of pride. Lila cleared her throat. "That said, we're reviewing Ridgeford's long-term enterprise needs. Evelyn's groundwork has been valuable, but a client of this size requires more refined account management. I frowned. I've addressed every technical and operational concern they raised. It's not just about infrastructure, Lila said smoothly. It's about executive presence, continuity, trust. I'll be taking point on the final negotiations. And there it was, the familiar pattern. Lila swooping in just as the deal closed, using polish and pedigree to push me aside. I steadied my voice. Caitlin asked that I oversee the implementation personally. Lila gave a tight smile. We'll discuss that internally. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. Because if Caitlin didn't see my face in that final meeting, she'd walk and they'd have no idea what hit them. Caitlin Ms. Rhodes has specifically requested that I lead the implementation, I said evenly. Lila's smile thinned, never touching her eyes. Of course, Evelyn. You've done excellent foundational work. Foundational. Like scaffolding, useful while building discarded once the structure stands. But they were disputing it. I saw it in the quick glances between executives, in how Malcolm Brennan, our CEO, avoided looking directly at me. We simply want to ensure this flagship account receives our most experienced client-facing leader, Lila continued. I'll be taking point on final negotiations and signing. 7 years of loyalty, hundreds of weekends lost. The biggest deal Marlo Systems had ever landed, nearly in the bag. And they were shoving me off the stage right before the curtain call. I cleared my throat. Is there a concern with my performance? Malcolm finally met my eyes. None. You've exceeded expectations, Evelyn. He paused, fingers tapping lightly on the table. But as we scale into higher value markets, we must consider the image we project to our enterprise clients. Lila has experience with Fortune 500 portfolios. Connections we need. He didn't say it, but we all heard it. Lila had a Harvard MBA and a LinkedIn network that read like a Forbes list. I had a degree from the University of Minnesota and results. Somehow, results didn't count anymore. The following week blurred into a stream of late nights and polite professional exchanges. I transferred every file to Lila, walked her through every interaction I'd had with Caitlin's team, and even drafted a tailored Q&A packet for the final presentation. I smiled, I nodded, I cooperated. But inside the resentment simmered like lava beneath ice. Then came Friday afternoon. The contract was scheduled to be signed on Monday morning. At 4:42 p.m., a new calendar invite appeared subject organizational review. Malcolm was listed. So was HR. I knew. Before I even stepped into that boardroom, I knew. The manila folder in front of my chair confirmed it. Evelyn, thank you for your contributions to Marlo Systems. Malcolm began, his voice as polished as the conference room table. As you know, we're continually evaluating our structure to support future growth. I said nothing. We've made the difficult decision to restructure the business development division effective immediately. Your position has been eliminated. 7 years condensed into a sentence of corporate detachment. I see, I said, my voice calm. May I ask, why now? 3 days before finalizing the largest deal in company history, this isn't about Ridgeford. Malcolm replied too quickly. It's about aligning with long-term strategy. I nodded once, but I knew the truth. They had just made the most expensive mistake of their careers. And Monday morning, they were going to find out exactly how big it was. We need to elevate our team's credentials as we move into deeper enterprise markets, Malcolm said carefully. You mean you need people with fancier diplomas? I replied flatly. His jaw tightened. If you believe stories like mine deserve to be heard, go ahead and tap subscribe, because the next chapter isn't just about redemption. It's about building something no one can take away. We need professionals with elite academic backgrounds and broader Fortune 500 experience. He clarified, his eyes drifting momentarily to the University of Minnesota diploma now packed in the cardboard box at my feet. Lila leaned forward, folding her hands. We're prepared to offer a generous severance package, 3 months' salary, extended benefits, and a strong letter of recommendation. How thoughtful, I said quietly, the bitterness slipping through. My face was hot with the flush of humiliation. 7 years of relentless effort condensed into a polite exit folder and a handshake. The HR director, a woman I'd maybe spoken to twice in my life, slid the manila folder toward me. All the terms are outlined here. We'll need your badge and laptop before you leave the building. I looked around the room, scanning their faces one by one. I wasn't expecting an apology, but part of me hoped for at least a flicker of respect. Instead, I found only discomfort and the unmistakable look of people eager to move on. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said at last, my voice steady. I stood, collected my things, and walked out. No dramatic exit, no tears, just quiet dignity. Back at my cubicle, Carter was already waiting. His expression was a mix of disbelief and anger. "This is ridiculous," he said. "After Ridgeford? Are they out of their minds?" I gently wrapped my diploma in tissue paper and placed it into the box. "It's fine, Carter." "Really?" "It's not fine. You delivered a $50 million deal and they let you go before it's even signed. You should fight this." I gave him a small smile. "They've made their decision, and on Monday they're going to realize it was the wrong one." He tilted his head. "What are you planning?" I closed the box slowly. "Just wait and see." Monday, 9:30 a.m. I was home wearing yoga pants and sipping coffee when my phone buzzed. A text from Caitlin. "About to walk into the lion's den. Wish you were here. Brunch this weekend," I smiled and replied, "Absolutely. Good luck today. Call me after." What she didn't know what I hadn't mentioned was that I wouldn't be in that meeting. I'd let the silence speak for itself. Some might call it passive. I called it strategic. A moment later, another message lit up my screen. "Of course. Can't wait to work with you on this." I set my phone down and waited for everything they thought they controlled to start unraveling. Part of me felt a twinge of guilt for not warning Caitlin. But a bigger part of me wanted Marlo Systems to feel the full weight of their mistake. Across town in the glass-walled executive boardroom, Lila Lansing would be triple-checking the presentation materials, preparing for what she assumed would be the most important contract signing in the company's history. Malcolm Brennan was likely already there, sipping espresso and rehearsing how he'd take credit for the acquisition. They were confident, relaxed, blissfully unaware of the professional tsunami headed straight for them. At 10:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Carter." I picked up. "Hey, Evelyn." "Oh my God," he said. "You are not going to believe what just happened." "Try me," I said, setting my coffee mug down. Caitlin walked into the boardroom, looked around, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Where's Evelyn?" I closed my eyes, picturing it. "Lila tried to explain you were no longer with the company," Carter continued, but Caitlin shut her down. She said, and I'm quoting, "If Evelyn's not part of this, we'll need to revisit the contract entirely." What did Malcolm do? Full panic mode. Started talking about team-based approaches and long-term value alignment. Total executive nonsense. But Caitlin wasn't buying it. She said you were the reason Ridgeford even considered Marlo Systems. Without you, they'd have to reevaluate everything. A small part of me savored the mental image of Lila's expression. And then, total chaos. She and Malcolm are in his office now. Legal's on speed dial. Lila's practically in meltdown mode, trying to see if there's any way to force Ridgeford to sign. "There isn't," I said quietly. "I made sure the final contract wasn't signed before I left." Carter paused. "How did you know this would happen?" I hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. "Caitlin and I were college roommates. We've been friends for years." Silence on the other end. Then in a low voice, "And nobody here knew?" "They never asked," I said. "They saw a public school degree and assumed I didn't have valuable connections. So what now?" That was the question I'd been wrestling with for days. Part of me wanted to sit back and watch Marlo crash without Ridgeford. Another part, the professional in me, couldn't ignore the opportunity for something greater. "That depends on what they do next," I said. I didn't have to wait long. Within the hour, my phone lit up 3 missed calls from Lila, 2 from Malcolm. And it was only 11:04 a.m., a text popped up from an unknown number. It was the head of HR. The message was short, overly polite, and tinged with urgency. Another followed. Then a third, 4 missed calls in under 45 minutes. I let them sit, let them sweat. Then, just after noon, Malcolm's name lit up my screen for the 4th time. I finally answered. "Evelyn?" he said, audible relief in his voice. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone flat. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding with Ridgeford. Miss Rhodes believes you're essential to the deal." "That's not a misunderstanding," Malcolm, I said evenly. "That's a fact." There was a pause long enough to picture him pinching the bridge of his nose, glasses off frustration mounting. "Perhaps we acted hastily. On Friday," he finally offered. "We'd like to talk about bringing you back to oversee implementation." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You fired me 3 days ago because I didn't have a pedigree. Now you want me back because you're about to lose $50 million. That's not—" He started. "It's exactly what happened." I cut in. "Let's not rewrite the timeline now." Another long silence. What would it take Evelyn to return? Salvage the deal. Over the weekend, I'd thought about this question more than once. At first, I imagined walking back in with a salary triple what they'd offered Lila. Maybe her job a public apology, a press release. But after a few deep breaths and a long walk, the truth surfaced. I didn't want to return. Not to a company that discarded me the moment I didn't look the part. Nothing I said simply, "I'm not coming back." "Everyone has a price," Malcolm insisted. "Vice President Equity. Both. This isn't about money or titles," I said. "This is about respect. And on Friday, you showed me exactly how much I mattered." I admit we handled the transition poorly. "Transition?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly, despite myself. "You eliminated my position days before finalizing the biggest deal in company history, because I didn't graduate from the right school." "That's not a transition, Malcolm. That's corporate elitism." There was silence again, heavier this time. "Caitlin is threatening to walk," he said finally, the desperation finally audible. "The board's meeting this afternoon. They're calling it a critical incident. That sounds like a problem for you and Lila to solve with your elite degrees." "Please," he said. "Just one meeting. Name your terms. Anything." I didn't respond right away, because for the first time in 7 years, I had the leverage. A text popped up from an unknown number. It was the head of HR. The message was short, overly polite, and tinged with urgency. Another followed. Then a third. 4 missed calls in under 45 minutes. I let them sit. Let them sweat. Then, just after noon, Malcolm's name lit up my screen for the 4th time. I finally answered. "Evelyn?" he said, audible relief in his voice. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone flat. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding with Ridgeford. Ms. Rhodes believes you're essential to the deal." "That's not a misunderstanding, Malcolm," I said evenly. "That's a fact." There was a pause long enough to picture him pinching the bridge of his nose, glasses off frustration mounting. "Perhaps we acted hastily on Friday," he finally offered. "We'd like to talk about bringing you back to oversee implementation." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You fired me 3 days ago because I didn't have a pedigree. Now you want me back because you're about to lose $50 million. That's not—" He started. "It's exactly what happened." I cut in. "Let's not rewrite the timeline now." Another long silence. What would it take Evelyn to return? Salvage the deal. Over the weekend, I'd thought about this question more than once. At first, I imagined walking back in with a salary triple what they'd offered Lila. Maybe her job a public apology, a press release. But after a few deep breaths and a long walk, the truth surfaced. I didn't want to return. Not to a company that discarded me the moment I didn't look the part. Nothing I said simply. "I'm not coming back." "Everyone has a price," Malcolm insisted. "Vice President Equity both. This isn't about money or titles," I said. "This is about respect. And on Friday, you showed me exactly how much I mattered." I admit we handled the transition poorly. "Transition?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly, despite myself. "You eliminated my position days before finalizing the biggest deal in company history because I didn't graduate from the right school. That's not a transition, Malcolm. That's corporate elitism." There was silence again, heavier this time. "Caitlin is threatening to walk," he said finally, the desperation finally audible. "The board's meeting this afternoon. They're calling it a critical incident. That sounds like a problem for you and Lila to solve with your elite degrees. Please," he said. "Just one meeting. Name your terms? Anything?" I didn't respond right away, because for the first time in 7 years, I had the leverage. But yes, Caitlin said if you took the job, and if their platform meets our needs, I'd absolutely be open to a partnership. The pieces snapped together faster than I expected. I could join a direct competitor, bring Ridgeford with me, and show Marlo Systems exactly what they'd thrown away. Clean, ethical, entirely professional, and undeniably powerful. "Send me Greg's contact info," I said. "Already did," Caitlin replied, amusement in her voice. "He's expecting your call." 3 hours later, I sat across from Gregory Langston, founder and CEO of Langston Strategic Systems. We met at a small cafe in downtown Minneapolis. He was younger than I imagined, maybe 40, but carried the energy of someone who'd built something from scratch. "Tasha speaks very highly of you," he said after we ordered. "She told me you're the most client-focused person she's ever worked with. I believe in relationships over transactions." I replied, "Technology evolves, but trust. That's the real infrastructure." We spent the next hour talking shop, his firm, my background, the landscape of enterprise software. Unlike my interviews at Marlo years ago, Greg never once asked about where I went to school. He was focused on ideas, on strategy, on the kinds of clients I could bring through the door. "Here's our challenge," he said, leaning forward. "We've got the product. It's cleaner, faster, more adaptable than anything Marlo's putting out. But I asked, but we need someone who can open doors at the top. Enterprise-level access. Real connections. Not just contact lists, but trust." I nodded. "You're looking for someone who can walk into a room and get people to listen." "Exactly." He paused. "I'll be blunt. I want to poach you." That made me smile. "I'm offering you the role of Director of Business Development. You'd report directly to me. Full autonomy, equity, and a compensation package that'll make Marlo's last offer look like a rounding error." My eyebrows lifted. "That's a strong pitch. I invest in people who deliver. And from what Caitlin told me, you've more than earned that." For the first time since Friday, I felt the tension ease from my shoulders. "I like your approach, Greg," I said. "When would you need an answer?" He grinned. "How about right now?" I laughed. "Let me see the formal offer first. But yes, I'm very interested." "Fair enough. I'll send it by end of day." He stood and extended his hand. "I'm looking forward to working together, Evelyn." As we shook hands, my phone buzzed again. Malcolm Brennan calling. I let it ring. I silenced the call without checking the screen. "Problem?" Greg asked, noticing the gesture. "Not anymore." I replied, a calm certainty in my voice. By the time I got home, I had 7 missed calls from Marlo Systems, 2 from Malcolm, 1 from Lila, and 4 from unknown extensions. 3 voicemails begged for a meeting. 1 email from Lila was so over the top, I laughed out loud reading it. I deleted them all and opened Greg's formal offer. The compensation package made me blink. Base salary double what I was earning. Generous signing bonus. Substantial equity. Relocation assistance, if I wanted it. But most importantly, real authority. Real trust. I signed it immediately and emailed it back. Then I called Caitlin. "It's done," I said. "I start at Langston next Monday." "Perfect," she replied, satisfaction radiating through the phone. "I just sent Marlo Systems an official notice withdrawing from our contract negotiations." How'd they take it? Like they'd been hit by a freight train? Malcolm even hinted at legal action. I snorted. On what grounds we never signed anything? Exactly what I told him. I also let him know we're exploring options that align with our strategic direction. "Let me guess," I said, grinning. "You're meeting with Langston next week, Tuesday morning. You'll be in the room, right? Wouldn't miss it for the world." The next few months unfolded like a masterclass in quiet professional revenge. I started at Langston Strategic Systems. The following Monday, energized in a way I hadn't felt in years. Greg gave me complete autonomy to shape the enterprise strategy team, no micromanagement, no underhanded politics. My first act as Director of Business Development finalizing the Ridgeford proposal. When Tuesday came, I walked into the conference room ready. Caitlin greeted me with a warm hug before we dove into our presentation. 2 hours later, we had a signed preliminary agreement, $45 million over 5 years. Slightly less than Marlo's proposed deal, but backed by smarter tech, a better team, and actual follow-through. News spread fast. When Ridgeford's name was linked with Langston, instead of Marlo, phones started ringing across the industry. Mine included. Longtime contacts, curious clients. Everyone wanted to know why I made the move and what Langston could offer that Marlo couldn't. I never badmouthed them. I didn't need to. The facts spoke louder than I ever could. Marlo fired me days after I landed their biggest contract, then lost that very deal when the client found out I was gone. It became a cautionary tale, one that echoed through networking events and industry roundtables. 3 months into my new role at Langston, I got an unexpected LinkedIn message from Carter. Lila was let go yesterday. Board cited the Ridgeford fallout and failure to retain key talent. Thought you'd want to know. I felt a brief flicker of satisfaction, quickly tempered by concern. How are things over there? I typed back. Tense. Stock's down 30% since the Ridgeford announcement. Layoff rumors everywhere. People are scrambling. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything cryptic. I simply replied, if you're open to a change, Langston is hiring. We value results, not resumes. 2 weeks later, Carter joined my team, the first of several strong Marlo Systems employees who quietly made the switch. 1 year after I was dismissed, Langston's strategic systems had grown by 150%. Our client roster now included 3 of Marlo's former flagship accounts, Ridgeford among them. My team had grown to 15, a diverse mix of professionals not handpicked for where they studied, but for what they could actually do. We had just wrapped our quarterly planning meeting when my assistant knocked on the door. Greg wants to see you. I headed to his office, where he sat reviewing a set of financial projections with a grin on his face. Board meeting went well, I asked, sliding into the chair opposite him. He looked up and nodded. Extremely. We're tracking to surpass Marlo's market share by Q3. That's ahead of schedule. Because of you and the team you built, he said, sliding a folder across the desk. Inside was a draft press release. Langston Strategic Systems appoints Evelyn Sawyer as Chief Revenue Officer. Effective immediately. I blinked. Greg? I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. You've earned it. You've redefined our entire growth strategy, recruited top-tier talent, and landed clients we couldn't even get in front of before. I smiled. It was the kind of leadership moment I once imagined having before Marlo reminded me I wasn't their image. Yes, I said. Absolutely. As I stepped out of Greg's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Caitlin. Have you seen the news? I hadn't. A quick search brought up the headlines. Marlo Systems announces strategic restructuring. CEO Malcolm Brennan steps down. Company seeking buyer. I didn't celebrate, but I did feel something deeper. Professional vindication. They had chosen pedigree over performance, connections over competence. The market had corrected their mistake. That night, as I shut down the lights in my corner office, I glanced at the framed University of Minnesota diploma on the wall. I smiled. Success was never about where you started. It was about where you refused to stop. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story, and more importantly, for seeing the value in voices like mine. I wasn't the loudest in the room. I didn't have a degree from a school that turns heads at cocktail parties. I had grit, I had results, and I had the quiet kind of integrity that keeps businesses running even when no one's watching. But for a while, that didn't seem to matter. I was dismissed, underestimated, and told without words that pedigree mattered more than performance. And still, I chose to rise. If something in this story spoke to you, if you've ever been passed over, replaced, or made to feel like you didn't belong, drop a comment below. Tell me your story. Or simply leave a note of encouragement for those still in that uphill battle. Sometimes the right words from a stranger can become someone else's turning point. And here's what I'd say to anyone going through it. Never let someone else's limited vision define your value. Where you went to school, who you know, or how you dress, none of that replaces hard-earned competence and character. Build your reputation on what's real. When people finally look past the surface, make sure they find substance. We may not all end up in corner offices, but we all deserve to work where we're respected. And sometimes the best kind of revenge is a quiet success no one saw coming.